If you're struggling with food, but are also on the spiritual path, then this video might be for you. Me and my wife were with some friends, some very good friends yesterday, and I was explaining to them how I enjoy fasting and I enjoy eating for health rather than for pleasure. However, pleasure is a part of it too. I do enjoy food after all. I was having pizza with them after all last night. But for the most part, I do enjoy eating for health. And I do fast, I intermittent fast quite regularly. And my wife fasts weekly, once a week when she can anyway. And we were discussing topics for today's video, and my friend suggested that why don't I talk about food and spirituality, and more specifically, can fasting lead to awakening? Well, yes and no. Fasting has been a practice for thousands of years in spiritual circles, in many different traditions around the world from ancient times till now. And that's because fasting is a practice of discipline, a practice of trying to become unattached to food. You see, food is so primal. It's the urge to eat for survival, to eat for pleasure, is a human instinct. It's probably the deepest rooted human instinct that we have, is to eat, because without it we die. Without it we become malnourished. Food and water specifically. However, we tend to drink water without pleasure. That is just a survival tactic, whereas food can easily become pleasure seeking. You seek food for pleasure, not just for survival. And that embeds that attachment even deeper into you over time. And so to combat that and to become unattached to food, people have practiced fasting for thousands of years. And like I said, it's most likely the strongest attachment any human can have, and human beings in general have. If you think of a hot air balloon, and they have those weights that hold them down when they're grounded, let's say, but the flame is still there, heating the balloon up. The balloon wants to rise. But it has these weights, and each weight represents an attachment. And among the weights, there's a huge weight, one particular huge weight that symbolizes food. It is the biggest attachment human beings really have, especially in this day and age when we have so much abundance of food, and we no longer, especially in most countries around the world now, we eat for pleasure, not for survival. We no longer need to eat for survival. We do tend to eat for pleasure for the most part, and we spend our days thinking about food. In between meals, we're thinking about food. And that just goes to show how heavy this weight is. So on this balloon, the biggest weight of all holding this hot air balloon down is food. And one by one, you can cut these weights off. And the more weights you cut off, representing the more things you become unattached to, the more awakened you are becoming. But for most people on the spiritual journey, one of the last weights to to cut off this hot air balloon is food. I dare say maybe it's the last for the majority of people, if not everyone, because it's so deeply rooted in the human being. But once you cut that off, it releases a huge weight, and the hot air balloon is more likely to rise. It will rise a bit more if there are a few more weights holding it down, but it'll still rise a little bit more because that massive weight has been cut off. So what I'm trying to say is basically food is, especially the pleasure of food, is a hindrance to your awakening. You may have awakened, but there are levels to awakening. You may not be fully awake, you may not be enlightened, but you may have awakened from certain conditionings, from certain attachments. But food may be still an obstacle for you. But because it's such a heavy weight, it's such a huge attachment, when you do detach yourself from food, you open up so much more space for the divine, for your spiritual growth. You open so much more space when you no longer care about food, when you only eat food just for nourishment and not for pleasure. You find yourself not thinking about food in between meals. Maybe a little bit, because you have to plan the meals and plan your nourishment, but you're not spending your days thinking about food in between meals. That opens so much more space for awakening, for your spiritual growth. So I urge you to practice fasting or practice eating just for nourishment, not for pleasure. And how can you do that? Fasting, there are several ways. 16 hours a day, you don't eat. For 8 hours a day, you eat. You could do a less dramatic one, maybe 14 hours abstaining from food and 10 hours eating food. You have that window of 10 hours eating food. How about eating just for nourishment, not for pleasure? Well, you start tracking your calories, and it may take the pleasure out of food for you, just simply doing that and realizing how many calories you're actually eating and how many calories you actually need. That can definitely help you shift your mindset. It may be difficult at first, but the longer you do it, the longer you start treating food as nourishment, not as a source of pleasure, the longer you do that, the easier it gets, and the less you find yourself thinking about food, and the more space you have for your spiritual growth, for awakening. So yes, in a way, fasting and detaching yourself from food can lead to enlightenment, to awakening. It won't do it just by itself. That's not the only thing you can do to achieve enlightenment, to become awakened, but it's one huge step you can do. Fasting, or just treating food as nourishment, and celibacy as well. Those two primal urges that human beings have, food and sex, that's why they've had these practices for thousands of years, celibacy and fasting, because these two are the biggest primal urges in a human being. That's why they have their own practices. It's not until recently that we've had practices for the other parts of our lives, but they have generally been labeled detoxes rather than having their own specific name. I may be wrong. If I'm wrong, please please let me know so I can correct myself. But there you go. So fasting or treating food as nourishment rather than pleasure can definitely accelerate your spiritual growth and push you further to a grand awakening, to enlightenment. So thank you for watching today. I hope that's food for thought. The pun was intended. Sorry about that. I hope that's food for thought for you. And I will see you in the next video. Namaste. Thank you very much.